Mr. Stephen Dodge, thank you so much for joining me today and being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you for giving us your time today, sir.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having it. You got the king here. Yeah.
Hey, no, we're all trying what you do with Ian, Joltz, all these things that are going on in the world. We're all trying to push forward Bitcoin adoption education together. I would love to get your state, of the market and just kind of what you're seeing and what you are focused on right now, and some things that are kind of top of mind for you because it's you have like a different perspective than probably a lot of people out there in the Bitcoin world, more of a developer mentality. Got the little buddy here. Give it a little more, the developer side, things of that nature. So I want to get your state of what's going on in the world. It's not, it's not the average macro take, I guess. You have a little different nuance to it. So spill your guts.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, for us, Joltz, we're specifically a Lightning first company. We offer a suite of rewards, Taproot asset integrations, wallet SDK integration, and toolkit. Really looking to make it just very easy for any business company to integrate Bitcoin, Lightning, and Taproot assets into their actual tech stack in their business day to day. And so I think for us, like boots on the ground. Again, we're very focused on Lightning and Taproot assets, and what I think is pretty interesting is just currently you're seeing all these other protocols that are coming out, on-chain protocols, between Runes, Ordinals, BRC20, and all these things, seemingly are here to stay and stick around, and how that kind of impacts things from an on-chain fee basis. What other protocols does that introduce to try to for some people that want to try to alleviate that on-chain pressure and high fee environment. And what I think is really interesting in Taproot assets and what we're doing at Joltz is just seeing that like there are some really, really cool and unique benefits that I think Taproot assets, really excels at, and is luckily here and hopefully the next week going to be able to prove itself and have its time to shine. Um, if anyone's familiar with Taproot assets protocol, it was developed by Lightning Labs about 2 years ago when they announced it. And that they, I think they raised just about $70 million, most part for development of that protocol. And the first like major release for like on-chain issuance and whatnot was actually back in I think like fall of last year. But what we haven't had quite yet is the actual like Lightning support for Taproot assets, and that's where all the real benefits come in because you get the low cost, extremely low fees, very quick transactions, settlement. And that's where things get to shine. And so for us, the way we're seeing the market evolve with again all these new kind of protocols that continue to come out is how can Taproot assets really find its place, and helping common end users essentially get around any of these high fee environments. If they're trying to just transact for something that's low value, can Taproot assets solve some of those problems? Can Taproot assets solve some of the common Lightning problems? The UX things that you see from like inbound liquidity or creating channels. Just again alleviating on-chain fees when it's a high on-chain fee environment. And so I think that's what we're really excited about. So we've launched the world's first non-custodial wallet supporting Bitcoin, Lightning, and Taproot assets. And we found some really, really cool stuff that Taproot assets can do. And so we're actually embedding this into our wallet SDK, and we'll actually offer it as a standalone service as well. But we'll have the ability to do kind of trustless swapping. So on Lightning, if you're swapping between, let's say, just regular Sats, and let's say, dare I say, a stable coin on Lightning, we would be able to do that extremely fully trustless, seamlessly, all within the wallet, which I think is a really big deal when you start looking at the broader, Bitcoin's space and ecosystem community, as you see, certain types of adoption happening geographically. If you look at LATAM, Africa, maybe Southeast Asia, stuff like that, I think it's pretty interesting that I kind of like to say now is like people like to use the big B and the little b of Bitcoin. Some people like to use the Bitcoin, the network, in order like the benefits to transfer value, but the actual like Bitcoin, the asset, you'll notice that there is some difference where yeah, sure, I'll maybe use the Bitcoin as the unit of account or value to transfer the value, but then whether I've either like sent it or received it, some people will just immediately convert it to their local currency. There's actual like big businesses out there that have made this is kind of their bread and butter. You have the Strikes of the world and maybe the IBEXs and some of these other like Neutron Pay, where they're using the Lightning Network to transfer the value, but then they kind of have these onboard off ramps, if you will, where people can just immediately convert that back to local currency on traditional banking rails. And I think that proves that there is a use case for both. Like Bitcoin, the network is valuable, and Bitcoin, the asset, people do deem valuable, obviously, but they might not want to put their whole asset value, what do they have, they might want to keep it in Bitcoin. They might need to convert 50, 80, 100% to a local currency for their daily lives. And Taproot assets is like really going to make that shine, I think, because you can now do that natively on the Lightning Network without then having to go and touch a traditional banking rail. And some people will say, well, okay, stable coins and in general are centralized, or they're not great, but I think that's just a little kind of a shallow view. Most common stable coins are fiat backed. You've probably heard of USDT Tether, USDC Circle, but there's a lot of others. You can have stable coins that are like Tether just announced one that's backed by gold. I think it's literally just called Tether Gold. But there's other ones that are commodity backed. There's ones that are backed by a basket of currencies, including Bitcoin. But it just goes to show that it's like the market's going to show and tell you what they demand and what they want. And if people are saying and showing us like already today, by the millions, tens of millions, that they're using the Lightning Network and Bitcoin to transfer value and then convert it to their local currency because they need it for daily activities or just life. I think that's a use case that we have to listen to, and we want to get that more and more Bitcoin, for Bitcoin to have more and more a piece of that, because it's crazy. Like just in the last 2-3 years, stablecoins is the number one, basically denominated, of value that is being used on all chains. It's not Ethereum anymore. It's not Bitcoin. Like it is the unit of account across everything. I think it's like almost like 80% or something now. Nick Carter did some really good research on it. I think like that's just something in my mind, like those two kind of the Taproot asset protocol and just what we're seeing with kind of this stable store of value that's not necessarily always going to be Bitcoin. And the rise of it and demand that we're seeing. I think that's really interesting.
And it's, boy, there's a lot to unpack there. A lot on your mind, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was writing down all kinds of notes and things like that. Do you think, I guess, like the second layer and third layers, like the higher layers, obviously it seems like, or I assume, I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like we're going to be really living on those layers going forward. And it makes me think of like liquid, things of that nature. Can you dive into, liquid, whether it's lightning, you have where the average pleb is probably going to use lightning a lot, obviously going forward into the future. And then there's liquid for seemingly larger transactions, obviously. And, maybe it's, escrowing houses or whatever it is. And you're doing these huge, settlements. But what does that look like with the wallet you guys are dropping, what you guys are doing? How do those all kind of come together? Because I know a lot of those terms, like a lot of the stuff you're saying, I know what it means. I can't always visualize it and see it all come together. So could you kind of like lay it out for the average pleb here so it makes sense?
Yeah.
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist. Available now.
Yeah, no. Again, I'm technical in my own right. I'm not a developer, but I know enough, and working with my team. But yeah, I think like there's a lot of, it always comes down to trade-offs. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, liquid, I'm a fan of. I think what they've, what's been built there and the usage that it's seen has shown it's, it can shine in a high fee environment. But there's always trade-offs. That one, the biggest one being trust, and it's technically not on Bitcoin. Like, yeah, you're gonna have some like federation and trust, and you're gonna move over to a side chain with that asset, and it's got a use case, and Aqua Wallet, I think is leveraging that pretty well so far. But from what we're seeing when it comes to like stable coins specifically, I mean, we've even got some entities in LATAM that have used Liquid and some other, I'll say L2s on Bitcoin that are not Lightning. But they want, it's just, I think everything you're going to see in the future is that, yes, there's going to be all these kind of L2, L3 hybrid protocols, if you will, but Lightning is still going to be that like interconnective tissue that connects them all. At least that's what we're seeing. I think, some of the other protocols and projects or DeFi or whatever you want to call them that are these kind of other bridges or ways of, talking with other chains, like they're always going to be around, but I don't think they're all going to make it. But I think for us and the way we see it is just the benefits that Taproot assets and Lightning has. I just think again have not quite yet had their chance to shine just because it hasn't been possible yet. But you're going to see them here very soon in the next quarter or so. And to get into that more specifically, like the swapping is really, really cool. I can't wait to be able to show that off. But again, just imagine if you have a wallet that you can hold a stable coin asset or any other, like it doesn't have to be a stable coin, it could be any other Taproot asset, for better or worse, whatever that might be. But it's just proven that the market that people want that. You have like some kind of slider of risk you're willing to take of like, this is how much in Bitcoin me as a company or me as an individual that I'm willing to keep and hold, and there's just this other portion of kind of the pool of funds that I have that I would rather have denominated in a stable form of account or unit of account, and that I can spend and transact daily. And so I think that's just a way better user experience if I'm in LATAM paying maybe it's in the Bitcoin jungle or the circular economy. If I'm spending my sats, with vendors, merchants, back and forth, peer-to-peer, whatever, daily using, the Lightning Network, like I think it'd just be much easier and much cleaner UX if I'm just doing that natively, on the Lightning Network versus, going to some other side chain or having to, have some trade-off with trust. That's just my personal view and, our company's view. But then the other really cool thing is like Taproot assets can help with like the high on chain environment as well, a fee environment on chain as well. As I think it's pretty interesting is that it introduces something called a VUTXO. It's just called virtual, UTXOs and unspent transaction outputs. And so you can do some really cool things with like batching. And so you can imagine in like a high on chain environment, let's say like runes, for example, they're here to stay, whether you like them or not. But
you seem happy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because it helps our use case, but it's like the way they've set it up is I think over time, the shorter naming, whatever they call the naming convention, unlocks shorter names, and so I think you'll see these kind of ebbs and flows of like high on-chain fee pressure as more of those unlock and people go to etch and mint those. And what's really cool is that Taproot assets with this virtual UTXO kind of capability is that essentially you can do batching. And so let's say there's a high as things go up, people want to kind of combine their virtual UTXOs. You can basically carve that on-chain fee up across many users, and so it's virtually infinite. And so then you can basically cut up whatever. Let's say it's $20 to do an on-chain transaction at the time. You can scale that infinitely to maybe where the cost for each UTXO then is maybe like 10 cents per user. Batch them, and then it goes in one on-chain Taproot asset or Taproot transaction. So it's like, okay, that's pretty useful, especially for the common person that's looking to transact on chain. It goes both ways. It's beneficial on Lightning and on chain. So I think that's pretty interesting, and just something that we'll see more and more of, especially as I'm sure there will be some other. I know there will be more protocols, and I know there will be more use cases that people are going to try to stick, on the main layer. There's permissionless. There's nothing you can do. So, the more I think we can showcase that and find better use cases for it, or our wallet being one, that the more benefit that people will see, and just a cleaner UX.
And it's so fascinating. Is it? How do you see just the layers, I guess, playing themselves out in a sense? Like I know there'll be different use cases for things. I mean, is it really just the free market's gonna like even the inscriptions or ordinals, runes, all these things going on? Are those things just get feed out eventually? Are they gone? I mean, if people want to pay for them, I guess, then sure, I guess pay for it or whatever. But how do you see that come together? Obviously, it's been a big topic of discussion for for a long time, but it just ramped up again over the last handful of months. Is that something where again the free market just kind of weeds itself out eventually, and to the best, the cream rise to the top type of thing?
I think it's interesting, like, as a startup ourselves, I have a couple of views of it. I do think the market will obviously ultimately decide, but part of a market is there's a lot of different players. There's, a lot of different pieces that move. And so I think the ones that will basically keep these new things coming that are in there, whatever the current form is now with these other protocols and things, but whatever the net new ones come, the following years. Yeah, I mean, there's venture capital, in a lot of this stuff. And if you can
Yeah.
raise money to build some protocol, like you're just going to keep that, engine rolling. And so I think there will be a continuation of what we see now, whatever things, are new that come down the pipeline. And it is kind of funny because like we'll hear like from other people in the community or even like VCs we've talked to and just kind of telling them about our company and our products and services is a lot of people will just be like well, why don't people just want sats, why do they want these other things? And we're like, we agree, like why would you not just want sats? But the
Mm-hmm.
market tells us literally otherwise. Like while Bitcoin is a obviously huge $1 trillion market cap, it's like all right, well there's also I don't know how many other blockchains out there now, and even on Bitcoin
Right.
now, it's like, okay, well, whether you like it or not, people want collectibles, they want tokens and all that. We're not really necessarily focused on that. Use case, it's more not the degen use case, it's more of like the what we feel is more like the professional day-to-day use case, if you will. But yeah, I mean, it's just proving that people want that. It's like people don't just want just sats, so there's really not much you can do about it. So if that's going to be the case, you better build and plan and do everything you can, with while acknowledging that. And so that's kind of where we're at. And so we've focused on the company to really help B2B be a B2B company and help the partners that we work with, businesses, merchants, whatever it may be, really help deliver value to their end users or customers. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just free market's a free market, permissionless protocol. If you buy into it, that's just the name of the game.
Yeah. What do you say to people who are, again, it's like the Bcash argument. You're seeing again. We're seeing it come up a lot again, and it's like, well, Satoshi, he wanted it on the main chain. This and that. When you think of all I think of is the blockchain trilemma. Obviously at that point. But what do you say to people when they're they're coming with FUD or they're coming or it's just an average person, they're having objections and you're kind of educating them on things, whether they're business owners in Bitcoin or maybe they're outside of Bitcoin, don't even know, and they're hearing these things of like, well, I heard Bitcoin's broken, or I heard what do you say to people when they're like, well, we got to fit all these things on the main chain, like that's the final settlement, so Bitcoin's broken, we're going somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already. I mean, that's kind of like the state of the market to
Yeah.
a degree now. I mean, like obviously people went and built everywhere else. Like, a good example is that I think Tether was initially, or stablecoins in general. Like most everything started on Bitcoin. First collectibles, all that stuff. Way back when, and then because for one reason or another, people talk about Bitcoin not being highly programmable or it just doesn't have, it's too limited in functionality, doesn't have smart contracting, all that stuff. And then they went to these other chains and did their thing. And now you're kind of seeing this, build on Bitcoin thesis that's out there with, again, everything we've just talked about. So I do think it is like turning because you're seeing a lot of people now build on Bitcoin, whether you agree with it or not. And there are some interesting, things that I think are going on out there that are, pretty interesting. Like there might be a really good use case, again, to like want to permanently store something on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's like, for whatever you might think it is, but there could be, I think it would be pretty interesting, compelling to say that there is a use case for that. Now, do I think the current, whatever form it's taking right now in a lot of things, which is, most of the market, I think, is still like JPEGs or just,
Mm-hmm.
degen tokens or whatever. Like, do I agree with that? No, but there could be a form of that is extremely valuable one day. Like maybe it's not right there right yet, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about the Bitcoin blockchain, pristine, most secure, stand the test of time. So I do think like the use case is interesting and compelling. You just need to find, like a really solid justification for doing that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as it plays out, like I think there's just going to be a slew of different protocols, different layers that are going to talk to each other. I do think it'll be really interesting to see over like the next 6 to 12 months. I mean, you are talking probably over 100 companies, I feel like, to date that have raised, tens of millions of dollars individually, if not, hundreds of millions of dollars to do all this kind of, new L2 protocol or some type of, bridging with, EVM or some other, chain, or, the BitVM thesis is really strong. So I think you're just going to see a lot of stuff, and like, there could be something really interesting out of it. Like, we're builders, we're tinkerers. Like,
Right.
I want to see something, and there's some stuff that I think needs to be done, even just, on, in Bitcoin Core and just some of the other BIPs that are still out there. Like, there's stuff on privacy that I think we could still look at, like, that we can reflect upon internally. But yeah, I mean, hey, we introduced this with, so it's like we made this possible in the last couple of years with, some of the updates. So that's just kind of the lay of the land as I see it.
Yep. I was just, you segued perfectly into like what I was going to ask you next, even, because again, not everyone knows whether it's the BIPs. I would love for you to kind of just explain, just back up Robert Kiyosaki style, who the guy who's, 75 years or whatever, and he knows all these things, but he's always having his guest step back for a second because most people are not at this level. Could you explain just some of the BIPs and, Taproot and Segway, some of these things that have happened over the last, number of years that have allowed us to get to this place? Could you just take a step back and explain, briefly some of these different, new protocols that have been implemented?
Yes, I mean, obviously getting a BIP approved, or actually getting consensus on it, having it pushed out, if you will, at a high level is not an easy task. But once it is out there, we've had Taproot most recently, and a couple other ones that came with it. But yeah, with things like that, where you are now able to basically put arbitrary data in the witness data, that's a thing that we all agreed to. We never thought it would be used in this way. It's like I've always heard some people like kind of trashing, ordinals and, these things. I think, in a sense, rightly so. But I'm also like, well, hey, like, these are Bitcoin Core devs, and this was the community that, enabled this. It's like we allowed this functionality to be a thing. Was it intended? No. But kind of be careful who you're trashing. These are the people that literally make, support Bitcoin, probably some of the most important people in the space. So I was just, say tread lightly there. But yeah, I mean, BIPs are needed, and you can obviously go on GitHub or any other, site that kind of hosts them, and you can review them. I think there's some really interesting ones. Like, one I'm pretty adamant about is BIP 324, but it's basically goes to, like, everyone thinks like, Bitcoin is encrypted and like everything's jarbled up, and like you don't really know what it's doing. But it's like, no, actually, like, unless you're using Tor or something else, you are really just sending like these packets, over the internet, and you can, any packet sniffer, like ISP, things of that nature, could pretty easily tell like what is a like Bitcoin packet or transaction in general, is kind of the gist of it. And from, it's been a little bit since I've checked in on this one, but from what I remember of it is, basically it introduces a bunch of noise in the like actual data packets itself. So you can't really decipher or discern like what the Bitcoin, packet looks like compared to other traffic on the internet, because otherwise you would, run risk of maybe an ISP being like, oh, this is obviously, a Bitcoin piece of data coming across the internet. I'll try to like keep it high level. Like, this is obviously like a Bitcoin transaction, or this is like obviously like something related to Bitcoin. I can just drop it if I wanted to. And so I think that that's pretty interesting, because it introduces this kind of noise at random numbers, if you will, in the packet, to make sure that this, packet of data going over the internet looks the same as everything else. So you can't just, drop it off. So like, that's an example of one that I was like, oh, that sounds pretty useful, given, how we've seen the world goes, and history shows us, how, governments or entities with their own incentives, will act however they want to. If they deem that, China trying to ban, Bitcoin mining, for example, they'll go to extreme lengths sometimes to do just that. Us in the 30s banning gold, it's like, hey, we've done this in the past. Don't think it's wise to think it can't happen again. So like, yeah, something like that. Like, there are some interesting BIPs I think we should look at and be like, maybe we should put a little more focus and emphasis on some of these, because I think it'll help, just the longevity, security, privacy, and just, the Bitcoin ecosystem and the protocol itself as a whole.
And in this frame of stepping back for a second too, for people that don't know, again, when you say, hey, we decided on this, could you explain to people like who decides, like what does that process look like? Because I think that's a very important part for people to know about this protocol, about this system.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if you ever like read the block size wars, like that kind of gives you a pretty like ground zero insight into it. I'm not entirely sure if like the quote unquote process has changed. Like obviously, if you don't like if there's a hard fork or a soft fork, there's subtle differences there. Soft fork, is basically just a way to kind of keep going without necessarily like going like the Bcash route or gosh, what were some of the other ones? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Other versions of Bitcoin that like had a hard
SV
fork.
was yeah,
Yeah, like
SV was
I
off
forget
of
how many there were.
Bcash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like instead of going that route, you have like a soft fork, something that's been approved and added. But I think you'll have the maybe like three levels. You'll have like the proposal itself, like you can go and view these BIPs. It's a Bitcoin improvement proposal. It's right there. Read it. They're generally pretty technical once they really kind of get some legs and moving. Like there's probably a high level overview, but they generally jump right into the code in the protocol itself. But you can read about them and what they are. And then, yeah, I mean, if there's a good proposal, I think the community starts talking about it a bit more, and you kind of see that in the block size wars, like people, whether there's one side versus another, maybe it's not just 50-50 or whatever it is, but people will give their opinions. Bitcoiners are very vocal. But then you'll probably I think whoever it's impacting, like it kind of can be specific, I guess, depending on what like the actual use case or kind of user experience that it could be impacting, depending if it's like something like really protocol level changing. Is it focused on like, block templates? Is it focused on, like how wallets derive, keys, whatever, like it just, there's such a deep and wide range of what Bitcoin can be, or what, could potentially change. But then, yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's got a, like I think it was, Taproot is like, hey, all the miners and nodes will go in, and then they basically, signal if they are, you know, yeah, I'm good. I'm now running this, or I'm now using this new proposed, that was been proposal that's been pushed out. And then once you, reach a certain level of consistency, it's kind of there. That's like a really high level kind of simplified view, I would say I put it, but I'm sure there's always more politics, and does that process change in the future? I don't know. It's like there's other ones out there that people have been pushing for, like OpCat and like other stuff out there that's another types of like just proposals that some people deem small and easy, or just like should have been done a long time ago, or like Satoshi talked about this in the past, like therefore it should be true and should be accepted. Like there's just all these different moving pieces and players in the space that, yeah, just everyone's got their incentives. Everyone has their risks and concerns. So I think it is really interesting. I don't know what the next one might be. It could be interesting. What those like turn out to be. I need to like probably follow up on it and look into it a bit more. But I think it'll be interesting. Yeah, over the next few years, whatever comes, just because you are continually just getting more and more adoption, and therefore you kind of have like new players, on the board. You've got
Yeah.
the BlackRocks of the world now and ETFs.
Yeah.
You got Wall Street, Main Street. I think is kind of already like been here in the sense of like the little man has been here and been able to play in it so long, but it's not in the sense of like, oh, we have full adoption of like Main Street
Right.
businesses yet, at least in the U.S. Maybe even like Canada, even still in like Europe. It's like I
Right.
think you're seeing way more adoption in like LATAM, Africa, Southeast Asia, and things like that for kind of common day use. But yeah, with more players on the board, more people with seats at the table, how those dynamics work out, I think should be pretty interesting. And couldn't tell you how it'll be in the future, but I think it'll be probably more interesting than it was in the past, in my opinion.
Is there anything that scares you in Bitcoin? So talking about all this, obviously, it could be people running Bitcoin Core. They can be influenced. You could start trying to influence all tons of the developers or whatever it is. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. And as we know. So, is there anything that scares you in Bitcoin?
I don't know if it necessarily scares me. I think there's some things like that maybe concern me. I mean, like I said, like the
Mhm.
BIP 324, I think that one's like kind of
Yeah.
interesting, but I don't know, there is like definitely some centralization or consolidation in like the mining pools. It's kind of worrisome. It's like everybody was supposed to run their own node and do their own thing, and like now you just have super, super large mining pools um, that just kind of dominate, the space. I think we're still pretty geographically dispersed in terms of like actual like where miners are and hashing power, and obviously like if you run your own node at home, like that's fine. But like in terms of like the mining space, like that's maybe something. I do like that there's been, introduction of like, the whole ocean, uh, new block templates and things like that. Like, so you'll see if there's like an issue or something that people deem that they don't like, they don't want to include, like, these inscriptions and stuff like that. Like, we are able to, build and, solve for things. Um, I don't like the fact that on some of the entities in the space or that we've seen, that they'll kind of go outside of the mempool and pay for, transactions and putting things, into a block. I don't like that at all. It's supposed to be a market and everyone's supposed to know. That way, fees and everything can be, as the true signal is there. It's there publicly for everybody to see. It's not some side deal that I can essentially go to you, a miner, pay you on the side to do this. I don't think that is intended or should be encouraged. Again, how far do you take a free market? It's like, well, somebody was willing to transact. I think maybe it's like, is this like, are we talking about the free market just like on Bitcoin, or are we talking about the free market Bitcoin and everything else included? How do you define that and what is the scope of it? But I think that's one that I don't necessarily love. And then I don't know. I think maybe just the other one is just like just really the kind of pushing for a. I wouldn't say it's like the legal clarity. Me personally, I could care less what the government thinks, but I think that the like push for adoption and like getting clarity amongst like everything else that's out there um, is kind of interesting and scary too a bit. Just because it's like for so long we were like, Bitcoin, whether you wanted the ETF approval or not. And we're like pushing for this mass adoption thing. Like, how do we get Bitcoin into more hands? Whether people are actually holding it or not, is it the right way or not? Kind of irrelevant. But it's like, you know, Bitcoin was supposed to stand out and be this, neutral asset. It's deemed like a commodity. It's not, security in the, purview of the government or any legal entity. But it's like, okay, we got the approval, and here we are a couple months later, and it's looking like ETH and everything else is going to be green lit too. And then like what is that snowball effect kind of into? It's like I don't know. I'm just kind of concerned. It's like, all right, we've seen so many things that have failed because they're not Bitcoin, like they're just like centralized exchanges or just bad apps. Like that's one thing, but it's like, okay, you're now just going to have even more money just come into all these other, probably because there is no, again, let's see what the final ruling is. But it's like, all right, there's already VCs in the Web3 and all these other spaces and blockchains. But it's like, yeah, now you've kind of given the green light for more formal, or I guess there's no legal, not as much legal risk as there used to be or concern. It's like, yeah, you can now build this on everything else, and like how many more scams or how many more things happen because of that, kind of where I'm going with it. So it's like, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. So it's like, I just don't want to see more people like, get wrecked because there's some new DeFi service or app that does this and people just don't know the trade-offs or the risks. And just because it's got some, you know, famous person or well, known company or VC behind it, like that's proven that it's that no stamp of approval should ever matter. You can have some of the most brilliant or well-known people in the world, and unfortunately, a lot of people will just go based off of that. And yeah, I long-winded way of saying I don't know what that brings, but that's kind of my fear is like if these things get the pass that they're getting and looking like they will, like yeah, how does that impact people in such like a critical time too, where it's like in the next 6 to 12 months, like arguably to date, like probably the most important or um, in a sense like biggest bull market that we'll see in terms of like hopefully adoption, maybe not price action. But yeah, I want to see people not get wrecked or screwed over, especially in such critical times.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I know so many Bitcoiners feel that way, and that might be even to the detriment of us, to a sense of or at least our own personal sanity, at the very least, of trying to help everybody. And I think it's probably generally a human trait where, like, we don't want to see people suffer. Like, none of us want that. We're emotional beings and things of that nature. Bitcoiners, from everything I've seen, tend to be pretty altruistic, and we're trying to change the world. You're trying to, like, help everybody. And so it gets painful at times, because you're like, I don't want people to get wrecked. Like, stop going into this stuff. We're like killing ourselves trying to do all these things. In saying that, since you brought this up, the ETH thing, I was stunned, like, what was a day or two ago, when all of a sudden that came out, like, they're permanently suspending the SEC investigation into ETH. I mean, what is that? Like, besides, like, people just getting wrecked, and, like, the Nolan Bowerlay, like, is like, hey, ETH needs to be 1,000 times bigger so it can take down all of Wall Street, which I empathize with. I partly agree with that. At the same time, like, what does it mean for, like Apple, or like some of these companies have to be looking and be like, wait, what? Like, then why am I doing all this compliance? Like, what am I doing here? Like, where do you, like, how do you make sense of all this? Like, what is going on? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but, like, you open up the ETH can of worms in a way. I don't know, like, what is going on right now. I guess even politically, maybe your thoughts on that, of just kind of the the state of we're in. But we're, like, in the weirdest time, like you said. I don't even know what to make of it.
Nothing surprises me anymore. But no, that was kind of like
great answer.
Trying to be, like, high level to a degree here. But yeah, it's just like, you have, like, BIPs. Kind of back to that. It's like, you have a process, a structure that's kind of in place. But I'm like, all right, even with that, like, I don't know if the process is always perfect, and, like, there's, like, one way of doing it per se, because sure, you do it, but then it's like, all right, well, we did that, and we introduced, something that was an unintended consequence. Or you, again, like, you have people going around and paying for things outside of the mempool. So it's like, you can do things with a process, and still people can skirt that, have other incentives, do things behind closed doors, if you will. So, like, when it comes to, like, this realm too, that was kind of to your point. I was like, I don't know what rules. Yeah, like, what are the rules if people aren't? At the end of the day, it's still people. I always go back and, like, it's just people at the end of the day. Like, Bitcoin can obviously be self-sustaining to a degree, but I didn't think that it would happen that quick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it isn't, like, it is right. It's like, why are all these other companies, like, why have they been doing this compliance? Or, it's just, like, really hard to get a read. It's like, I don't know how you ever navigate. Like, we hear it all the time, but it's like, and I do sympathize with the people that are running these companies, whether, we agree with their tokens or blockchains or not. It's like, at least just tell us or not. It's like, the government could have done this years ago, whatever their vision was. But it seems like they just do a 180, and I imagine somebody got paid or stacked their bags with some altcoins like the day before. Like, where's that chain analysis? Like, oh yeah, Nancy Pelosi's. Obviously, you're not gonna be able to know it's hers, but it's like, something probably happened, and then they'll pump their bags. So they had their incentives in the back door. But that's my thing. It's like, it's like, you can literally influence these things, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the software, the protocol, or the people involved. It's still humans at the end of the day, and humans are flawed, and people are going to have their incentives. So, but hopefully, just Bitcoin keeps doing its thing, and that's all we need to, necessarily not the only thing we need to necessarily focus on, but let them do their thing, and we just got to keep doing what we do and do it better. Got to build better.
Yeah. Well said. And like you said, the first 30 or 40 minutes, that's what you kind of laid out in a way, right? Like, the adoption, education, the proposals, like, making sure we're making it better, and being the better, it is the life raft off the Titanic, but being the better option, right? Like, I think Lynn Alden just said that in her interview yesterday, I think with McCormick, and was just saying, like, we shouldn't be anti-fiat, really. And, like, we shouldn't, like, it's like, just build the better thing, and just say, hey, look, this thing's way better. Just come over here. People will realize the downsides of this other system. They know it inherently. So anyway, that's well said.
Well, I think that's interesting. Like, that is kind of why, like, I do push back on people, I have hesitancy for people that just dismiss, like, stablecoins, for example. I'm like, and, people just saying that we need to completely ditch fiat. I was like, I don't love fiat. I don't agree with it at all. Like, in the current form, it's bad. Like, was fiat backed by gold a lesser evil? I mean, it was, I think,
Yeah.
arguably good,
Right.
in a real sense. But it's like, yeah, it's like, and how quickly are we going to ever reach hyper Bitcoinization in whatever form we really think that is, and what threshold it is? Like, love people when they say it, but I'm like, that's decades away. Like,
Yeah.
good luck. Like, will it happen quicker than I think it was going to happen? Like, do I think it will happen like quickly over like a long enough time frame when we look back at things? Like, yeah, I think, in the next 10, 20 years, like you'll have a pretty significant portion of people doing things like this on these new rails. But yeah, even like to the stablecoin points, like, I don't know, this could be like a better version of us trying, like, it's almost like the market experimenting. Again, there's different types of stablecoins too. There's fiat-backed ones, there's commodity-based backed ones, there's ones that are like, more programmatically, they just adjust and do things on their own. What was the one that Luna, for example, Terra Luna, kind of not that version of it, but like they're ones that try to do something, like that. Again, there's stable coins backed with other cryptos and things like that. So like there's all these different flavors, but for the ones that people know, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like a better, not a better version, but at least it's like a market version of trying to do a dollar value that's not necessarily, controlled or coming out of the government, the Fed. So like, yeah, it's not Bitcoin, of course. Like, we're all going to, personally vote for that. But if you want to be able to get the next, 40, 50% of the world that we're trying to get on here and use this for everyday transactions, like, people just don't have the days, weeks, times to dive in like we do. So we need to make that UX as clean as possible, give them the stepping stones, a way to get on, use Bitcoin without them even kind of knowing it. And then you ease them, into the next phases and next, hopefully more natively just pure Bitcoin, over time with, good UX, good products, good services, good people backing them, behind them. And I just think, yeah, like, people writing that off is just like it's not realistic, for just, the common person every day, especially with just so many different geographies, so many different, use cases, issues. I mean, if your local currency is literally just going to crap, and like, that's something that you're gonna like, oh yeah, if I can't get dollars locally here, or I'm like unbanked and I can permissionlessly, and I think that's the other thing that people miss too, is like, you can technically, like, wrap or bridge and move some of these, stable coins, over these networks, so you don't have to necessarily have like a bank account per se. You can do like a wrap version, but I can still hold it in, a stable form of value, or whatever. Most of these are dollar based. But I don't have to go to a bank. Like, some people are just unbanked. Like, I can't get a bank account and do it. So it's like, you're just going to say that these people are, stablecoins are bad and dumb and not helping them. I think it's just, too high level of a view without like looking at all the different pros and cons for people's, and people in different situations all across the world.
Yeah. It's funny, like you were just kind of explaining all this, and just keeps it makes me think of the and I don't know the exact quote, but it's like, science or progress moves forward one funeral at a time. Like you were talking about hyper Bitcoinization, it's going to be decades away, and it just depends on what metric you're looking at, obviously. But like, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it's probably when our kids, generally, like when they're adults or older people, yeah, they probably live in like a fully Bitcoinized world, but that's decades away. So, it's important, I think, for people to take that long-term approach with everything we do, which is very important. Segueing a
You can go to
little bit,
Bitcoin Jungle and do it all day, though. That's what I'm saying. So it's like, or I'm just saying, like, you can go to Bitcoin Jungle, like other places, like there will be places for sure
said,
that, you can, geographical, you can do that. But I'm like, globally, like, good luck, and, good luck.
Yeah. Unless tomorrow, Russia starts pricing Bitcoin, which might happen. You never know.
It could turn on a dime. I'd be happy to be proven, wrong on that. I will be willingly open to that. Yes, please. I want that, for sure.
Oh man, so true. All right, so segueing, what are your thoughts? Give me a quick, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but, because it's not like a fair question really, but give me your thoughts on like just price. It doesn't have to be like now, but like, what do you see over, the next 5, 10 years, 15 years? Like, what do you think what do your models look like, I guess, just generically in your head?
For a Bitcoin price specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely think we'll see, the next bull run here, in the next, I don't know. I think personally, I think it'll probably actually happen like right around election time. I think there's just other things that go into like obviously you have, post halving price goes up, but I think there's just a lot of other factors this time around that we haven't seen. You've got a lot of paper money and things that people can do to the price. Just again, a lot of different players, but I do think we'll see, hopefully very, very big move upward later this year and into next year. But longer term, I think it is interesting because it's like, as we talk about hyper-Bitcoinization, I don't necessarily know what price means over time if prices are going away. Like, what are we pricing it in per se?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if it's the US
It just becomes
dollar,
a trade.
probably the
It's not
last
price anymore.
yeah, it's like is it the last thing standing? It's like Jeff Booth always talks about, just Bitcoin eating everything, and obviously, he talks about some other things too, like productivity and software AI, like kind of eating away. But I think like in terms of like Bitcoin eating away at the things that you can denominate it in as those prices go away, it is interesting because it's like, yeah, what does like a Bitcoin standard look for a country, a sovereign nation? What does that look like? I mean, definitely think the price will be higher up for sure, because I'm very confident we will have more money going around, so it has to go up, both probably nominally and in real terms, over time. But I would like to say 288K at least in the next 5 years. That's always been my number from a couple tweets. Like I think it was last full cycle. Like when 288K, I forget whose model it was, but it was like 288,000. I was like, I like that number. It seems highest, so I like that number. That's the one I'd hope for. And then yeah, I mean maybe next bull cycle, I'm hoping that we even after the run up is that we're at least permanently sitting at six-figure Bitcoin, going forward for a while. But for us, like, what does it matter? We're never going to spend it. We're just going to hold it. We're not going to. It's like the GameStop. It's like we're the first version of that. It's like no, you hold it, you never spend it. I don't know, but.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. Like I've been thinking lately because I'm come from the Robert Kiyosaki school. I mentioned him earlier, and that's where I 15 years ago really got into after the crash. You and I are about the same age, and it was you see the crash, and I really dove into Kiyosaki, and it was cash flow, right? Cash flow, and I have yet to hear anybody say Bitcoin flow, because it won't be cash flow eventually. It's going to be Bitcoin flow. Like, what can your Bitcoin? Because to your point, you made me think of this, which is, you have to say, hey, what's the price of Bitcoin? Because that's what everyone thinks of nowadays, like 99+% of people. But it won't be the price anymore. Like you said, when the dollar's not here or fiat's not here, then you can't denominate in that. So that confuses the hell out of most people. So it's, hey, what does my Bitcoin buy me? It's the purchasing power, right? Like, does it buy me a block? One Bitcoin buys me a block of commercial real estate of New York City, or what does it buy me? And I think that's like, what's the Bitcoin flow you're bringing in? What does your Bitcoin then go produce for you on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? So anyway, that's the new thing I've been thinking of lately. I got to write a piece on it actually, because I've heard no one talk about Bitcoin flow. Everyone talks about cash flow, but that won't exist. So anyway, quick side note, but I wanted you to touch on. You can touch on that really, but I also want to throw this out there too. Gaming, like Bitcoin gaming, Lightning gaming. What, I know that you have some, thoughts on this. I don't know if Ian's doing stuff like this, but I would love for you to kind of touch on that world as well, and just kind of what you're seeing there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting. We're actually talking with a couple of companies right now. So like just again, maybe back up with what Joltz, is and offers. I don't always like to just talk about Joltz, but here we are. Yeah, I mean, we offer an enterprise standalone API that we started off as a rewards company. We saw a gap where like, Fold and Lolly was very, very interesting. Loved them as a company, but we saw them more as like affiliate-based models, and it was really based off of just like purchases. And so we were like, okay, is there an opportunity here? And we were like, yes, I think there is, because can we add like Bitcoin rewards and incentives as a capability to any program or pre-existing program for a company or business as just another option for their end customers or users? And it doesn't necessarily have to just be like, oh, I made a purchase, therefore I get 5% back in Bitcoin. It could be, and we have companies using our API for making like referrals. We have them for sprinkling sats because they completed an onboarding process, or maybe they left a review, shared content, like whatever you can incentivize and that you deem valuable as a business for your users or consumer to use a business, we support that. And I think it is really interesting that Lightning, as we all know, is, the best use case as far as I'm aware, and think there will be for like micro incentives on Bitcoin. That's why we went with it, because we're like, okay, people might earn a very small amount, in value back depending on the amount they buy, or again, if it was like if I left a review or a like that might only be worth 10 cents, good luck getting that on chain. You need Lightning. And so I think for gaming, it is really interesting because, we were talking about how we're the same age, like we came up when, games were first being made, but I think the new generation, with just how technical they are and how early they start, just how big gaming has become. I think it is really, really interesting that, Lightning solves a really interesting. I mean, we have obviously some great examples of that already, like Zebedee and Thunder Games and a couple others out there that are, doing their thing. Love them and support them, like what they're doing. But I think more broadly, just like, maybe not just games, but like gamifying things, for the masses in whatever way, like we work with Bitcoin Well. We've done a really cool rewards gamification way for now. Like they have this, they're playing on their wishing well logo, or the well logo in today, Bitcoin wishing well. So they're using our API. So anytime they earn points by doing things on the Bitcoin Well platform, they accrue these points, they earn them, they can flip a coin. It uses our API. We did the designs too. It was pretty cool in animation, but it uses our API to do the probability that we were doing, and lands on whatever it is. Maybe it's 1,000 sats and a million sats, whatever they end up doing and changing over time. It could be prizes, like here's a free hardware wallet, whatever. It gamifies the experience more, engages people more, and keeps them coming back and rewarding them for doing actions and supporting their company. So I think like gamified engagement and incentives and like hooks is really, really interesting, because that can go for the gaming industry itself. It can go for traditional e-commerce, merchants, whatever. But then gaming itself, I think, is really cool from like the Taproot Assets protocol, because you can now, this is like originally why we went down Taproot Assets, is because, people hear token and think, oh God, bad shitcoin, whatever. We saw it as like the best option to basically cross the chasm to bring traditional businesses on board, or traditional, whatever it is, could be games, like on board to doing this, because you could now basically create your own branded reward point, or like, we're all used to getting points at Starbucks, wherever we go, shopping on Nike.com, Nordstrom, wherever, airline miles, we're used to getting points, but they're kind of a scam and they just get devalued over time, generally speaking. And we're like, hey, you can now create your own branded, point and back it by Bitcoin. So, I could earn an airline mile. For every 10 airline miles, I earn, 100 sats or whatever it is, whatever that dynamic needs to be. And I think for gaming, that's really interesting, because you now have this native internet money that can be, moved back and forth, with micro vaults, P2P. And you can actually have them as, a gamified branded token, or it could represent, still actually represent ownership of some digital asset if you wanted to, in-game digital assets. Like that's a huge market. People spend money on it. People want it. Fortnite skins, Rocket League, stuff, you name it. So I do think there is a pretty interesting play there for like Bitcoin to kind of push its way in there. And I know there's like, again, companies doing that pretty well. And I think we'll have our role, and again, maybe a more broad sense. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting play, and I want to see Bitcoin do well there too, because last note is just like the unfortunate thing with like the other chains that I've seen is just like a lot of people build on, like Polygon or, Matic and all these others, Tron or something, because it's cheap, quick, and, it has all this programmability in it. Like, that's why all these other companies are, there was like a good year or so where people everywhere was doing something on Polygon or Tron for that, because of, low cost transactions, high speed, programmability. And now that Taproot Assets is here, it's like, hey, you can do this on Granite, you can do this on, the gold standard, and do this, in something that's going to stand the test of time.
Absolutely love it. All right, one last one here before we do a little word association, and wrap it up here. What do you think that people could do in terms of just marketing Bitcoin? Like Aladdin, we always talk about this, right? Like,
I was just about to grab my trading cards. I was like, they can do this.
Well, hey,
I
it's
gotta grab
the
him.
next segment, obviously presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Look, there we go.
There we
Yep,
go.
there, he's got him. Steven's rolling. So what can people do? Is it having Snoop Dogg at conferences? Is it getting on the Late Show? Is it being on Oprah? Like what when you think of like marketing Bitcoin, is it just every Bitcoiner being a Chad and looking like a Chad and just working out all day long and having a hot wife and 6 kids? Like I don't know what it is. Like what do you think that Bitcoiners need to do to keep pushing forward the marketing, the brand of Bitcoin?
Personally, and I don't know if it'll, if I could ever take that torch and do it, or if someone else, but like I do think it is a version of like basically what like Michael Saylor is doing for like the business professional world. I think we should really try to see a move. I think we kind of have this already organically in Bitcoin, but I think like we need that, GameStop type moment, or we need, whether people like it or not, you had like the one percenters, the Wall Street, good God, what was it back in 2008? The Occupy Wall Street like kind of movement you had, just like people going out there being loud and vocal. Yeah, Tea Party. It's like I think we need like that level of like not necessarily like in your face, like of course like never violence or being stuff like that, but like I just think we really need something that's just like middle finger to the system. It's not just like, oh, you hear about Bitcoin, the price going up. Like, no, like there's actually like let's learn how to like convey the message a little bit better, but like still have that hint of like there's like an enemy out there. It's like all these movements do extremely well because like Wall Street bets and GameStop, they're sticking the middle finger to Wall Street and the big people. It's like Occupy Wall Street was going after those big people, the banks, yada yada, Tea Party, kind of government, things like that. So I think like we don't know what form it takes, but I feel like that would be like the best marketing we could do right now because it's like we are between a rock and a hard place with how things are going in the traditional finance world, and like somebody is going to hop on that opportunity. For better or worse, don't know who it is, what the angle will be, but somebody's going to ride it and own it. There's going to be something that comes out of this. We'll look back 5, 10 years from now, remember the name that we gave it. It was on TV for 2 years, whatever. But I think that should be us, this time around, given all the momentum we have. Again, don't know who that is, if it's a group, single individual, whatever. But I think like that's probably the best marketing we can do at right now because people need something to kind of, I forget the quote, but it's like people need something to be basically like angry at. And you can get a very big, movement moving the needle, I think that way. So obviously it
That's so
means like
interesting.
probably something bad has happened, but we're trying to transition
Yeah.
to something better. So why not, capitalize and own it?
That's so interesting. I love that. That's the first real time I've heard anyone say it like that. So that's really fascinating. I wrote down a couple different notes and thoughts that you make me think. So, man, very interesting. And it feels so like right there. Like, many of us kind of look around, right? Bitcoiners are like, how are people not doing this already? Like, how is this not like a massive movement of people in the streets at this point? But hey, I think we'll get there to your point. Really fascinating. All right. As we said, little word association to present it by Bitcoin Trading Cards. New segment, as I always say, always a new segment every single time, just like Caleb Presley says in the Sunday Conversation of Barstool Sports. So a new segment, a little lightning round word association. So just spit out, it could be a couple words, obviously, but one word. If you can think of one word, great. If not, a couple words. We'll go through these bad boys and wrap her up. All right, first one, Satoshi Nakamoto.
Grateful and just say it's not one word, but just like again appreciate the fact that he built Bitcoin and then just had the courage to like walk away. Like I always just think that's amazing. Just left it out there.
So good. Personal home mining.
I mean, Umbrel, just because I still run 2 Umbrel node servers or nodes, so it's a Umbrel.
That's a topic. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. Faith.
I mean, I think religion, obviously, first thing that comes to mind. But yeah, then probably faith in humanity, just hoping that we have enough faith in ourselves to do the needful with such a crazy world today, that there's enough faith in ourselves to do what we need to do for a better future.
I love that. Vitalik Buterin.
I don't even know if it's a word. It's more of like
I love it.
more of like a noise.
We'll accept it. It's that passes. Elon Musk.
I was like greatest. Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I just think greatest entrepreneur. I just one or two words, but yeah, people give him a lot of crap, but I'm just like, guy just doesn't know how to stop doing all these different things, and like he is like the voice that we need. Political views aside, like I think he's just a voice that we need. Someone that not powerful, but like known and much influence, like to be kind of on our side. That's rare today. So
we'll milk him for all he's worth for at least however long we have him. Oh man. Central banks.
Evil. In the Fed.
Yeah. There you go. Community.
I mean, I think of Bitcoin. Honestly, the first thing I think of, Bitcoin community.
Okay. Politics.
Oh, smoke and mirrors.
Like it. Hypnotism.
Passing out. I don't know. I just imagine if I got hypnotized, random. I would like fall over and hit my head.
Oh man, I love that. Locker room humor.
Dirty talk, I guess.
I love it. Bitcoin conferences.
Overpriced.
The free market.
Truth. Or reality, maybe even better.
Oh my God. Lightning gaming.
I mean, I just think of Thunder and Zebedee right away.
Yeah, I love it. Bitcoin trading cards.
Ooh. Just clean. Clean. I just want to open them, but I can't. I always say it. It's just like the new packaging. I look at it, I was like, dude, like I just want to touch the cards and packs, and I just want to open them. So they're just like so clean. They just look so cool, but it's
a mental tug of war. Mm-hmm. And finally, Joltz.
Ooh, Joltz. Man, that's a tough one. I think of my team.
I like that. That's a great answer. Great answer. Well, you passed, Stephen. You passed. Where can people find you at?
Yeah, they can check out Joltz obviously at joltzrewards.com. It's JOLTZREWARDS.com. Hopefully we'll be getting the joltz.com domain here. Someone was sitting on it for like 2 years over charging for it, and now it like redirects to like some malware or something. So we're going to try to pawn it off of them. So hopefully it's just joltz.com soon. But you can find us on X, Twitter, at Joltz_BTC. Find myself at rdodge__3. On LinkedIn too. But yeah, I would say Twitter and X is the place to go. So Joltz_BTC. You can find us there, and we try to keep everybody updated with what we're doing.
Beautiful. And any last words of advice? Where people should go study, whatever you want to throw out there. But again, thank you for doing what you do and being a voice in the space and being, most importantly, a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. So I thank you, brother.
Really appreciate it, man. You too. It was fun. And yeah, look forward to all the stuff we got planned this year. A lot more to be excited about. So keep grinding.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows, of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the hosts and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world, one collectible physical trading card at a time, by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.